Welcome back to The Short Game. This is a show where we talk about short video games, the kind of thing you can complete in an evening or a weekend, games that respect your time. I'm your host, Reagan Kelly, and I am joined this week by Laura Nash. How are you doing, Laura?
I'm terrific.
And Nate Heidinger. How you doing, Nate?
I'm doing well. Systematically destroying every single radio tuner that I own. Just in case.
What decade are you living in that you own, like, radio tuners? The only one I have in my house is in my car.
Nate's old school, man.
That was one of them, which, by the way, I need a ride. Yeah, just got a lot of radio tuners. Less now, thanks to this game.
So for those of you listeners who still have radios in your homes, the game that we are talking about today will make you want to throw them out. And that's Oxenfree by Night School Studios. Oxenfree is a point-and-click... Actually, point-and-click is the wrong phrase because I used a controller on this. It's an adventure game.
It's a walk and hit spacebar adventure game.
Walk and talk.
It's a Sorkin simulator. And... It's a game about a bunch of teens. People have kind of compared it in tone to things like The Goonies or Stand By Me, which actually I think is a little bit accurate, but not really also accurate at all. It's a game about a bunch of teens in the Pacific Northwest who go on a sort of camping trip. Mainly they were heading out to the beach on a little island to try and have a party.
Senior tradition, man. Or junior class tradition, I believe they say.
Man, high school
Yeah,
students.
but everybody bails except for the 5 of them, so...
They're not very popular.
Because, you can't do an adventure game with the entire senior class of a high school. That would be a colossal undertaking.
We just played Life is Strange. Yes, you can.
You have an excellent point. There's a lot of comparisons to be made between this and Life is Strange, but it's not an episodic game. It's very tight. It's very compact. This is a game that's, a single story told well, I would say, over the course of, maybe 4 hours?
Yeah.
Yeah, I played this all in one day, but it was a day where I didn't do a whole lot of stuff, so I just kind of would play for an hour or so, go into a different room in my house, and then be like, I'm going to go play more Oxenfree. But I did complete it in one day without it feeling like I played an absurd amount. So I think it was somewhere around 3 to 4, which I feel like that would be probably the average.
The game is from Night School Studios, which is brand new. This is their very first game. And so like a lot of new studios, they like to really mention their previous jobs a lot in their marketing. So the main things that they tout are that there's a bunch of developers here who are formerly of Telltale and also some artists formerly of Disney. And I think that's really they're really trying to tell you straight up front what you're getting here. This is a game that it does its own thing somewhat, but the dialogue system is very rooted in the sort of inventions of Telltale, the way that they innovated in the adventure game genre, and the art style is straight out of the background art of Sleeping Beauty era Disney. It's gorgeous.
The backgrounds look a lot more like the concept artists or story artists. It doesn't look exactly like that polished Disney look. It's a little bit more painterly.
Yeah.
But you can definitely see that kind of style where there's a really strong outline to things, and it's been dabbed over by color that looks like background painting.
I thought of Ori, actually. And maybe that was just the way the map was put together. But I kind of felt some similarities to the look of Ori in this.
Yeah, it's becoming a bit of a cliche to call the art style in a game painterly, but this really looks like it, almost
Daubs
every...
of paint.
Yeah, physical paint. This is a very... you can see that this is... Obviously, I think this is digital painting, but it almost isn't. It really does look like some... And this was all created, in Photoshop. We're not talking about 3D renders here. This is a very physical-looking painting.
Yeah. They use the Unity engine for this game.
Yes, but all of the art is 2D except the characters. So the engine, almost doesn't matter. We're not talking about a 3D game here. The characters themselves are tiny on screen and really are, the only 3D thing in the world, including the land that they're walking on is all just a sort of 2D painting of a landscape with paths and things sort of drawn into it.
I would say they are Sims-like, both in their appearance and in their motion and in the way they express themselves.
That's a bit of a diss,
That's
but
not
I kind of
doing
know
it.
what you're coming from. Yeah.
I don't mean that as a diss, but it's true. Like, it's fine, but they like gesture at each other and little thought bubbles pop up, and they're tiny enough that you can't make out very good individual features.
And only one person can go down a ladder at a time. Very polite.
Yeah, it made me think of The Sims a lot. But you're right, that sounded like a diss. I don't mean it that way. It's just, I mean, anytime you have a tiny sprite with a little thought bubble and just like an image in it, gonna think The Sims.
And all the thought bubbles are colored as if you're picking very different branches. They don't really seem to have meaning to them, but I mean, the whole color scheme is very Pacific Northwest. It's got this kind of faded, misty, hipster. I mean, it's an island in the middle of the night. What are you going to do? But I think at times when they wanted to use color, it stuck out real strong. So the background wasn't helpful. Didn't really tell me what it wanted me to do. It took me a while at the beginning to be like, oh, that's a wall I'm supposed to climb. Oh, okay. But that was easy because I only had 4 buttons, up, down, left, right, and I figured down was what I needed to do next. So I started climbing down.
Yeah.
You can start figuring it out, but it doesn't make it easy for you.
So I think structure-wise, this is an adventure game that draws really heavily on some of the trends in things like games that you'd call walking simulators. Oxenfree is really telling you its story through dialogue and through exploration of a space and kind of, finding items. You're not really solving puzzles here. You're hardly even like when you think of dialogue in adventure games, you think of, I'm going to walk up to that person, click on them, and look at a menu of dialogue options. But here, we're really hearing one string of dialogue, one conversation, almost like the sort of conversation you'd hear in a television show or a radio play or heck, even an audiobook. Like this is a continuous conversation. This game from beginning to end is basically one long conversation between these 5 teenagers on this island. And that conversation is the game. Like there's things to do. You can interact with objects. You can pick some things up. You can flip some switches. But pretty much your main interaction with this world, apart from walking just from place to place, is just picking dialogue choices. And whether you pick those choices or not, the conversation is going to continue. This dialogue has like a real serious clip to it, a pace that I've not seen in dialogue in a video game before.
I mean, those are some chatty-ass kids. But I'll also say that there's 2 mechanics. You also have a radio, so you can hear more talking.
Yes.
There were, no joke, there were some times in this game that I wish I did not control a character, and that I just wish that I like made the dialogue choices and just watched it play out. Because like the controlling of the character is such a minimal element. It's so much so. All throughout your traveling, there's like little obstructions in the road that you have to press like X to get your character over.
Yeah, little ledges to jump up on. That
yeah,
kind of thing.
ledges and cliffs. And you're not jumping. You're going up to it. You're pressing X and your character jumps. So you're not like timing a jump or anything like that. And I was trying to think like, why is that there? And I think it really is because they needed some sort of like act, like something for the player to do in between walking from point A to point B to point C. And they're just like, well, let's give their character like an action. So you're like, you're scaling cliff walls and jumping across little ledges and stuff. And it makes all these kids like appear super ripped because they are jumping across like 10-foot chasms, like just free scaling
casually without even breaking stride in their conversation
or
right?
breaking conversation. Like he jumps, Jonas jumps across the thing mid sentence. It's a far enough jump where he like has to land like chest high on the other side of the ledge and pull himself up, and he's just like, yeah, so what are you guys going to be doing this weekend? And in the middle of that sentence slams his chest against a wall and climbs up. So I think it was just because like they put all that in there because it would really just be walking back and forth. So they had to add some like some human involvement.
It's a gorgeous painting, when you're looking at it, and the movement from place to place is really just sort of about exploring this very pretty painting that you otherwise can't see the whole thing unless you walk through it. But really, the dialogue is really the whole deal here. So if you're interested in a game where you're basically going to be spending 4 hours investing in these characters and listening to them talk and occasionally chiming in. If that's not interesting to you, this is probably not your thing. But for me, games that really focus on dialogue are really exciting. And I can't think of a game that I've played that has had more dialogue than this over the course of 4 hours.
Yeah, and there's no subtitles.
Yeah.
And
Well, I think you can turn them on.
You can turn them on.
But
Yeah.
Telltale, for example, it's default.
That's
They're
true,
turned
yeah.
on by default.
Oh, I see.
And, for this, I think it's only for accessibility purposes. I think they did not want you seeing the words on the screen. And I think a couple of my little nitpick qualms with this were also around some of the treatments of dialogue. I mean, sometimes things got cut off. I didn't know if I was going to be interrupting if I hit a dialogue.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to be rude.
These are fast-talking teens, and when it interrupts, like if you pick a dialogue choice in the middle of somebody else's speech, and that's something just to explain what I mean. When other folks are talking, occasionally above your character Alex's head, little dialogue bubbles will pop up that you can choose with one of the buttons on the controller. If you choose one of those, sometimes she'll wait for them to finish speaking before she has her say, and other times she will just jump in and speak. And it actually does that interruption really well. Like, it somehow makes that interruption sound very natural and like a part of the conversation. People interrupt each other pretty much naturally. But sometimes you kind of just want to hear the rest of what they're saying, and it feels like you got to wait to the last second to get your word in. Otherwise, you're interrupting and missing some dialogue.
I think that some of the information they're trying to deliver is a little confusing because they give you little pop-ups, people's faces, and I don't know if that means I like them, I dislike them, I thought about them.
That's what it is.
Like,
I think it's only I thought about them. Whatever you said made that character think about that other character. For better, for worse, whatever.
Yeah, I think it's a subtle version of Telltale's like, so-and-so will remember this.
Yeah.
or the little butterfly in Life is Strange.
This game is, like we're saying, pretty much 100% spoken dialogue. The voice actors all did a very great job in this. Like, I thought each of them were unique enough and believable. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, there were no Life is Strange fishermen saying "by Neptune's beard." Like this, it was very realistic.
Man, I was thinking about that same thing. Like the writing on this game was fantastic. There were never any times that I thought like that's a stupid thing that a teenager wouldn't say. Like they avoid most like slang. These are all very like pretty well-spoken kids, can speak their minds pretty well, so you don't have to worry about like adults writing teenage language with this game. Like they do a pretty good job with it.
They're like smarter, quippier, more funny versions of your high school friends.
Yeah.
I loved the dialogue, but I did get a little bit of Veronica Mars of these are like smart, like 28-year-olds voicing teenagers written by 30-year-olds.
Yeah,
and I was okay with that. But at the beginning, it did throw me knowing that they were setting themselves up as teenagers, that they sounded so old.
Yeah. And you mentioned the voice actors, like they've got to be in their 30s or something, these voice actors.
Well, not all. I know Nona was in Borderlands and is maybe like 26, 27.
Yeah.
But that's still like they're playing 15-year-olds.
My whole point is that like I feel very that stuff very easily pulls me out of a story, especially in video games when it's like bad dialogue or bad voice acting or like just cheeky or like really lame or something. And that part of me was never like set off in this game. I was never just like, oh, that was stupid, So even though you're right, they had the like everyone is smarter than a real human element to it, like they weren't being knowledgeable. They weren't being like super deeply knowledgeable adults. They were just like kids who kind of speak better than you would imagine, which is fine.
They all have the kind of quip that you would come up with 30 minutes after leaving the party, and but they've got it right at the right moment.
Exactly.
You mentioned the voice actress who played Nona, and I have to say, I thought the voice acting in this game was really good. I don't want to complain about any particular one, but she was my least favorite. Yeah, I do. Like, she was really flat and sort of disaffected style of dialogue, which works for teenagers until crazy things start happening. And we will have a spoiler break here in a minute or two to talk about some of the crazy things that start happening on this island. But she was disaffected throughout, right to the end, and she didn't stick out to me too bad. But once we got towards the end of the game, I didn't think she was quite on the same page with the other. I have a feeling like that, and this is normal for voice acting, but you got the feeling that she definitely didn't record with the other folks, and she was kind of on a different page for them tone wise.
I would actually, I do agree with you. I would say though, I actually kind of thought that for everyone though, like. Mm-hmm.
They were pretty calm about it.
Pretty much, like there's some. So pre-spoilers. There's some crazy shit that happens in this game, like beyond what anybody would have to go through. And for the most part, all of them keep their cool the entire time. The most are like, "Whoa." Isn't this like? Oh man, I can't believe this is happening.
Yeah, they are remarkably calm and collected about what's really a strange experience.
I enjoy that the game lets you be upset about things, but your friends often don't get that pleasure.
Yeah, dialogue wise, like also. It does a remarkable job of sort of being like the West Wing style dialogue. Like there's never a break, there's never a moment when people aren't talking until suddenly there aren't.
If you haven't done something you're supposed to, everyone's quiet.
Yeah, like I had this moment about halfway through the game where I was trying to get across the island, and it's a big map, and it's a lot of little like circuitous ways to go through every area, and it's not always really clear because the map is sort of unspecific. It's not always really clear exactly what route you're supposed to take, and I thought I was going into the right area, but as it turned out, I was going entirely the wrong direction, and the only way that I figured that out was that about halfway into my journey across the map, suddenly there was just no more dialogue to hear for like 10 minutes. And it was very unnerving because there's this is a game where the dialogue just never ever stops, never lets up. You're always making dialogue choices. You're always saying something. But, there are times where if you go down the wrong path, you won't hear anybody talk for a while. And not even a hint, not even a, hey, I don't think we're supposed to be going down this direction. Why are you going over here?
Or the Life is Strange. I don't want to go there right now.
Yeah, like nothing. And so I kind of felt like that took me out of it a little bit. I would have liked actually a little bit of guidance there, even in terms of like having a character speak up and say, I don't think we're supposed to be going over here, or,
Shouldn't we be going back to town? Or Yeah. The map is beautiful, and I was thinking the whole time, if Shane were on this episode, would he be calling it a Castlevania Troid or whatever? Because there are a couple
with no platforming, and no
platforming.
Action, and no items.
Well, you do gain a power.
Yeah,
that
that's
gives
right.
You access
you get a radio.
to things you saw before. So I don't know. It might be Metroidvania.
Sure. Why not?
Yeah. It was always like satisfying because you would know you went the right way because there's a lot of loading in this game. The map is broken into I don't know, probably like 8 major chunks, maybe 6 or so. And as you cross between each major chunk, you hit a loading screen that doesn't take too long, but you go through it a lot. But if you are going the right way, almost every time you go into the next load screen, dialogue starts right back up, so you're going the right way. If when you went into the right screen, the dialogue is continuing.
Yeah, it does. It does start up again. But my problem there was that like if you go between areas and hit that loading screen while dialogue is ongoing, it skips to something else in the dialogue. Like it doesn't continue. People don't finish their sentence. It will cut you off and then start a new sentence when you load into the new screen. And it doesn't always even seem related to what was being talked about before. So that threw me off a little bit too. I was like, please at least finish your sentence.
Say it over the loading screen or something.
Yeah, well, a game that's all dialogue, having the dialogue be interrupted or incomplete really feels weird, like frustrating weird. So, yeah.
And it doesn't get picked up on the next screen. So if you go through the door too fast, you're just...
you've lost out on that. Now, there's so much dialogue that it almost does feel like any individual line might not be crucial. And I'm pretty sure that the real key stuff, they're going to make sure that you hear it. But yeah, it feels weird to lose bits of the dialogue in a game where the dialogue is the whole thing.
Well, they intertwine a lot of just like teenage stuff with like background stuff they just talk about a lot of things. So,
they're talking about their relationships with each other, their relationships with their families and their school, and they're talking about the world around them and the creepy stuff that they're experiencing. They always have something to say. And actually there's some nice options that you have about like which people to bring with you at which time. So there's some dialogue options in terms of who you're talking to for fairly long stretches of the game.
There is some very standard who likes who type high school drama that you deal with. But for the most part, the conversations that they're having are not a very typical high school type of conversation. So if you're listening to this and you're thinking like, man, this sounds boring. This is just like high school kids wandering around an island talking about high school kids. Like
it's high school kids this with crazy things happening to them. So they've got something interesting to talk about.
It's this. If you played Life is Strange, and the games are not very similar in tone or anything like that, but there is some similarities to like normal high school kids with like an extreme situation. And if you liked that game, I do. If you liked how that game felt, I think you would like this game too.
Without spoiling too much about the story, I think it might help to kind of set up who the characters are a little bit. So there's 5 teens on the island. Hey, teens. And you're playing as Alex. Alex is sort of a cool girl with blue hair. She's got a kind of a hip-looking red jacket on.
She is dressed like Marty McFly from Back to the Future. That's what she's dressed
You're
as.
absolutely right. Oh, my God. Yeah. Yep. So she's...
Sorry.
No, you're absolutely right.
We all just had to let that sink in for a minute.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. You're totally right. She totally is.
It looks cool.
Yeah. So Alex is going with her stepbrother Jonas, her new stepbrother Jonas, who she's only recently met, like tonight or something, like pretty recently, to a party on the beach. Also accompanying them are Ren.
Stoner.
Yeah, although I didn't really get a big... Like, his character's a little more than just the stoner. Like, he talks about weed like twice. So
I think he's more like the adventurous drug-taking friend. Like, he's
Yeah.
not just a stoner.
Yeah,
like, he's probably
that's
the one
fair.
who's like, what are you doing tomorrow night? I picked up some shrooms from a Canadian.
he's the fun, adventurous friend, but in a way, he's kind of the most boring one. He's just sort of the like random white guy whose defining character trait is that he ate a pot brownie at the beginning of the game. Like, I didn't see a whole lot of like interesting character development with Jonas, but he is Alex's closest friend in the game.
Ren, yeah.
Ren, excuse me. See, I'm mixing up their names, and I did that a lot towards the beginning of the game because they're the characters are small on screen, and until you learn what their voices sound like, it's kind of hard picking out who's who.
I have a question for you. How old is Jonas?
I think they're all in their like mid-teens, like 16.
So, my question, the reason I asked that is because early on, there's a kind of like I don't think this really matters. It's not really a spoiler. There's like this rumor that Jonas was in jail. Okay. And then you find out, like, no, I wasn't in jail. He was in juvenile detention. If he's also 16, then why would everyone think he was in jail? You don't go to jail when you're
because
16.
everyone didn't you have like ludicrous rumors in your high school? Like, of course.
It's more fun to say that he went to jail.
The kid in the gym class, the one who doesn't talk much, he killed a guy. I swear, I heard it from my cousin who knows his mom. He killed a guy.
That teacher burned down his house for insurance money.
I thought he was 23 years old until, like,
Voice acting.
deep into the game.
It's the voice acting.
That would have been real creepy for him to be hanging out late at night alone on an island with a bunch of teens, though.
Okay, maybe like 20, 22. Like, hey,
Yeah.
new stepbrother, we're going to a beach party. Like, I don't know. I didn't think it was that weird. It's just like, he's older than these guys. They all think he went to jail. And then
Yeah.
it's like, oh, he's still in high school too.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to place because, it's like teens in any media of the 80s. We should probably say, like, this is supposed to be set in what, the like late 80s, early 90s?
I have no idea. It's the Pacific Northwest. Everyone wears flannel anyway.
Yeah.
The dream of the 90s is alive.
Yeah.
I get the impression that it's meant to be a period piece, and I'm not sure if they specifically say when it's set.
Well, they don't have cell phones.
Nope.
Because that surely would have solved a lot of problems had they had cell phones.
Yeah.
Or do they? What do they use as lights?
Flashlights. Like actual flashlights. Very retro.
What? Who has an actual flashlight? There's an app for that.
People who are going hiking in caves. I don't know. If I was going to an island at night, I'd probably bring a flashlight.
It was a bad joke, Laura. We're going too deep.
I'm such a killjoy.
Retreat. The other characters, are Nona and Clarissa. Clarissa has some history with Alex that I guess we'll kind of leave out for spoiler reasons, but she kind of gives off the like mean girl kind of vibe. She's a little older than Alex. You kind of wonder at first why she's hanging out with these folks. And then there's Nona, who is sort of the quiet, I guess maybe slightly nerdy girl, who Ren has a huge crush on from the beginning of the game. And so that's one of the ties there. So these five take a ferry out to the island and find out that they're the only people who decided to go to this party. And so you're all just sort of hanging out on the beach when things that I would consider spoilers begin occurring. Is there anything else we want to say about the story before we hit a spoiler break?
I just want to say that I thought the music in this game was fantastic. It was creepy and nice at the same time when it mattered. And I'm assuming it's been playing throughout this episode.
Oh yeah, I'll be throwing as much of it in as I can. It's really cool. Like it's one of my favorite video game soundtracks of the last year already.
Of all of 2016.
I know there's some Morse code hidden in it that I heard bits and pieces. I didn't bother translating it.
Oh no, I didn't.
I
try
found that out
either.
after. Yeah.
The sound design is also just as good. I mean, there's tons of good ambient sounds. It is appropriately emotional when it needs to be. And the music is this great undercurrent that keeps you going, which is why it's even weirder when you get to a part where you're just walking and it's silent and the music's cut out and you're like, oh, I'm just not supposed to be here.
Yeah. The music, by the way, is by... it's one of those names that they've taken all the vowels out. I suppose it's supposed to be pronounced scientific, although it's SCNTFC. And that is the person/group, I really don't know which, that did the music for Super Brothers, Sword and Sorcery, among other things. So, obviously a great video game music composer. I'll have a link to the download for the, I think it's on Bandcamp, the soundtrack.
Yeah, it's great. There were many times where I just kind of stop and listen to it, which is always a good sign of a good video game song for me, if I actually just kind of stop playing and just start listening.
If we're cutting off before the spoiler break, I think it wouldn't hurt to kind of just give an overall assessment of the game. Like, if somebody were to stop listening right now, should they play this game?
Yes.
All right. We're done here. Let's go.
If you are I do think that, sure, there's going to be some people who don't like this type of game. Probably if you're listening to our show, you're probably into a game like this.
Yeah.
It is, and if you're not, that's cool. But if you like story-driven games that look and feel nice, sound nice, I don't know how you wouldn't like this game. There's some stuff that I do think is not perfect, and honestly, a lot of it is for after this break. But I really enjoyed this game, and we haven't hit on any of the major themes and the plot devices that happen. And I definitely recommend playing it if the first half of this has sounded even slightly intriguing for you, because the game is far crazier than what we've decided to talk about in this first half.
If you're going into this for a to the moon style, emotional ringer, this is not necessarily that game.
Yeah.
At least not for me. A lot of times people confuse dialogue heavy with heart-wrenching, weepy, This is not necessarily that, but it is really At times it's peaceful. At times it's really frantic. It's got it controls pace very well. If you've listened this far, you know whether you are going to like this game or not, or at least enjoy playing through it.
In terms of, in that context, it's more like a 80s teen adventure thriller or teen adventure horror kind of feel.
But smarter.
But smarter, yeah, than a lot of those were. Then you're like, emotional, heavy. Like this was no The Walking Dead, the video game for me, for example. Like that game, I was, torn by indecision, and there were tons of moments that just were emotionally wrenching. This doesn't really have that. This is more of a fun story told well. I would say, like, I definitely recommend this game. If you get particularly frustrated by slight mechanical problems, like there were a lot of times where I thought that this game could have done a lot better if they had kind of taken a different approach to the navigation, sort of traversing the map and moving from point A to point B. And I found that element of the game either uninteresting or frustrating and almost never delightful. But the dialogue was so good that it carried me through what was otherwise kind of mediocre. Like the art is beautiful, but is more of an obstruction to playing the game because there's no, like, it's not always clear where you can walk. It's not always clear where you can climb. There are definite moments that this game frustrated me and kind of dimmed the like luster of it a little bit. But because all that was going on while there was great dialogue happening, I never got frustrated enough by that to put the game down. And I'm really glad I did finish it. And it's only about 4 hours, so I 100% recommend the game. So here it is, your spoiler break.
So after you have your beach bonfire party and you get drunk, and I was really hoping that drinking would actually have a consequence in this game. As a teen movie style, like you had two beers, Alex.
You are such a moralizing mom, Laura. How old are you?
No, I wanted it to like have a fun consequence, like someone to be like, "You're drunk." No, I mean I had like 2 beers in the party, and no one said a goddamn thing. So. You can
drink a lot of beers standing there, like if you keep going back for them.
I don't think I realized that. I think I just like sat down and was like, okay, I guess I'm sitting now.
Yeah, you just continuously drink that beer. But then you get to go into a cave. Yeah, your friend Ren eats a pot brownie, and then you get to decide if you want to stay out with him or go into the cave. And I mean, who's going to choose to not go in the cave?
The thing with the radio crops up for the first time here, and I think this is one of the more contrived things. Like to me, it really felt like they were like, we need another mechanic other than picking dialogue choices. What can we do for another mechanic?
I feel like they designed around it. I think they were like, no one's done enough with sound as a central mechanic. I got it. We'll do a radio.
Yeah, I thought it was nice.
It didn't quite...
Well, okay, I liked the sound.
It was shoehorned in a lot.
I liked the way that it sounded. So, like, sound design-wise, yes, you're right. Like, it's a cool way to get some interesting audio into the game in a way that has some sort of, it feels of a piece with the game. Like, it's something that's happening. To explain, like, you bring a radio with you, a little hand radio, because according to local legend, if you stand in certain places on the island and tune a radio to a dead channel, you hear what? Creepy
vibes.
Spooks? Yeah.
Creepy spooks. I think they specifically say creepy spooks.
Well, there are numerous places on the island where you can tune your radio to various frequencies to either hear explanatory text, which is a kind of like museum audio tour of the Pacific Northwest island that you're on, or to interact with, I guess, ghosts, right? I mean, we're post spoiler break. We can say ghosts, right?
Ghosts, yeah.
Yeah.
Ghosts are maybe just trapped in an alternative dimension.
Yeah, I guess it's not. Well, it's both.
They use the word ghosts a lot, but I think that it's probably more accurate to say it's like a dimensions thing.
It's ghosts stuck in another dimension.
Yeah.
It's both.
Yeah. So you go into the cavern, and there's this weird sort of like triangle thing hovering in the air, and you tune your radio to kind of home in on it somehow, and this malevolent voice from beyond possesses one of the teens. And that's sort of the thing that happens repeatedly in this game, is that you will find an area where there are malevolent triangle ghosts. You tune your radio to interact with the malevolent triangle ghosts. They will say mean things to you and make threats of one kind and another. And then you proceed on to another part of the island where you try to learn more about why are these malevolent triangle ghosts threatening the teens.
Yeah, it's cool,
They're
though.
not shaped like triangles, just FYI. There's like a little triangle, like prism rift in space-time. I don't know.
Well, the
ghosts are not into labels.
The ghosts are not themselves triangles, but they're talking out of triangles in the air.
But Gravity Falls Bill would be real at home here.
Yeah, the triangles are the gate to which the ghosts are speaking through. But one thing that they do that I really thought was cool is, you know how in like a TV show or movie when someone would write a ransom letter, they'll cut out
Exactly
words from a magazine and paste them onto a piece of paper, and like that's their ransom note. That's how these ghosts speak. Only instead of words cut out from a magazine, it's like different humans speaking. So they'll do an entire sentence where a totally different voice did each word of the sentence.
Like it's all cut out of radio commercials or something.
Yeah. It's a great collage. It's great.
Yeah, it's actually kind of hard to understand what they're saying, but it's a great effect because it's like this game does a really good job of being spooky. I thought there's some stuff that's a little, phoned in, but there's a lot of stuff where I was like, this is pretty messed up. Like, all these kids getting possessed.
Yeah, and the art also gets really freaky at these points because the art has this sort of like, Little Golden Books kind of aesthetic sometimes. Like it seems very soft and very natural and very nature-based. And then suddenly, kids are getting possessed and there's like red rays coming out of their eyes and there's a sort of a visual vibration to it. And one of my favorite effects is there's a sort of a interference that you see in when your game screen kind of has this TV that's slightly badly tuned kind of effect that happens whenever the ghosts are appearing. So visually and the audio is just like dead on, really great way to take what would just be a kind of a 2D game with, there's not a lot of immersion in it and really make you feel that tension. Even though it never really makes you unnerved, it's definitely effective.
And that mad desaturated, like, gray mauve thing mauve is purple, gray-green thing is suddenly, like, when someone gets possessed, they get super, like, neon red and the blood is strong and it's like Limbo. Like, you get the contorted body of Limbo, but it's a character you've put a lot of investment in and not one you've seen in that position before, and that's really terrifying.
Oh, yeah. They get, there's almost some, it's not exactly body horror, but if you are, like, creeped out by, like, someone being, like, whipped into the air at like where their body is a rag doll and like thrown around, that happens to many characters.
It looks rough.
And you see many characters, well, one specifically, but you see like deaths of the characters that you enjoy, or at least you've come to know.
Oh, yeah, even really awful ones like on-screen suicides.
On-screen suicide, like it's and. I don't like to follow up that sentence with this, but this is when the game is working the best.
I actually agree with you 100%.
Yeah,
cut out the specifically on-screen suicide. But the whole last thing that we've been talking about is when I loved this game. Like they handle the tone switch so good, and it's so like dark and uncomfortable. It was awesome.
Yeah, the whole premise of the ghosts, the reason they keep getting more and more possession is because they're soaking into the body. Like, there's really good explanations for the supernatural.
Yeah.
In the sense of why they're doing the things they're doing. They give enough explanation, but they don't over-explain it.
So I think just to give everybody, an idea of why all this stuff is happening, we should kind of talk about like the core mechanic of the bad guys. And I think it's a pretty cool story. Basically, we've been talking about we're on an island. I guess in sometime maybe World War II era, a nuclear submarine crashed right outside of this island, and everybody in it died. And in doing
Or
so,
did they?
Their ghosts were sent to another dimension, and they have been trying to. I guess they live their deaths over and over and over and over. At least that's what I gathered.
Something like that.
Yeah,
something equally creepy anyway.
Yeah, where they're stuck in a time loop, where they're like constantly dying and constantly feeling this pain.
And they've kind of lost their humanity and their connection with themselves and their past, and all they want is to possess the teens as their way of escaping. They want to hitch a ride out on the teens.
They can actually there's like 83 of them or something like that. They can all possess like in this hive mind. That's why they speak that way. The like cut up ransom note style. Is because they're all kind of like one entity, and they can all go into like 1 to 5 teens.
We'll just split up the teens, you know. This team, these 20 people will take teen A, and it actually does a really good job of revealing that sort of information without feeling like a great big plot dump. You know, you learn a lot about the history of the island, which includes little scraps of information about the history of the submarine crash, but it also includes things like the history of some people that lived on the island before and have clearly interacted with the ghosts before you did. And so you get a lot of this information without really doing a lot of, without it really telling you a lot. Except that there is one scene where you do get kind of a story dump. It's a little late in the game, and it almost sort of feels like, if you didn't get it by now, here's a literal PowerPoint presentation where, we break into an old woman's home and watch a set of slides that she has assembled that literally explains this stuff in case you missed it before.
Did you not tune into the exposition anywhere else in this game? Well, you could still finish it. Here's a slideshow.
Literally a slideshow.
They have some really cool exposition dumps in the forms of the ghosts just straight up messing with these kids. There's
terrifying exposition dumps.
Yeah, terrifying. There's one, Jonas and Alex enter into, it looks like an old classroom, and the ghosts possess Jonas and force Alex, yourself, to essentially play like a quiz show where they're asking you questions, like how many people died on the submarine that day, and you have to answer. And on the chalkboard, they have a hangman game going, and every time you answer it wrong, they like draw more hangman stuff. And Jonas is like being flung around the room, covered in blood and all red-eyed, and it's super creepy. And very effective.
Speaking of that scene, that's also, I think, the first time that we run into the thing with the mirrors in this game. And that's something that you and I and Laura kind of got different experiences with. I was the first person I played this on launch day, and so I was the first person on my Steam list to play this game. And so there were several points, that one and a couple of others at least, where for no apparent reason other than, hey, creepiness, it suddenly flashed, Alex, you're playing as Alex, behind a mirror. And you saw a scene through the mirror that was unrelated. Like you'd start by seeing yourself in a mirror, and suddenly you were behind the mirror, and you had some dialogue choices that made no sense at all, giving some advice to the person behind the mirror, and you only had these 3 or 4 dialogue choices, and none of them made any sense because they were referring to things that hadn't occurred yet, which was creepy, unnerving, really interesting. It kind of played on the time loop thing. But I realized later when talking to you guys about it that was just like, I feel like my experience was sort of like if we can't do the really cool thing, we'll do this other thing kind of thing. Like, what happened for you guys?
I immediately text both of you or send it to our Slack channel because I walked past the mirror and your gamer tag, Reagan K.
Ray Gank was in that mirror.
Ray Gank is floating there, and then those same little text bubbles come out, but it shows me which one you selected. And I'm like, so Reagan just told me to not let Jonas talk to his mom.
And you haven't even really heard about Jonas's mom at that point.
Yeah, I have no idea what it's talking about. And for what it's worth, I absolutely still did let Jonas talk to his mom.
I did, but that
I'm not going to let you tell me how to live my life, Reagan.
You should have listened to Reagan K.
But for what it's worth, at the end of the game, I then had the opportunity to go through and make those selections. So I assume if I have any friends that I'm with on Steam, they may get a mix of like me and maybe if they're like if Shane went through and played this game, they'd probably get a mix of all three of us.
Yeah.
I would say it's not so late that you know the outcomes of those decisions. So it's still early. It's still before you have the opportunity of Jonas listen to it. It's still before the last scene with Michael. So you will still be giving uninformed advice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know what's interesting about this is that, like, I've seen other games where, like, first of all, Telltale and other games like that always have a thing at the end where you see what your choices were and can compare them against your friends. And that's pretty much standard for this sort of adventure game now.
Not in this one.
But yeah, what I thought was really interesting here was that they really made it fit thematically and even sort of story-wise into the game. Like this sort of like creepy out of context, out of time interaction with another version of yourself just felt very much like it belonged in the game. It wasn't just something that happened. And the fact that it was coming from, somebody on your Steam friends list is even cooler.
Yeah, one thing that we haven't really touched on it as much is like time is a big deal. There's forward in time, backward in time loops, which were super effective. The time loops in particular, where you'd play out a scene and then it would go like the like TV going out of focus, like, and it would go back to the beginning and you'd play the scene again. Yeah. You and Alex recognizing that you are entering the exact same moment, but everyone else not really noticing it, though. The more it happens, they kind of start to realize, like, didn't we just do this? It's a really good storytelling.
Or flashing back to scenes that happened before you ever ended up on the island, even years ago, with your older brother who's now dead. Michael.
I just realized we just described like half the plot of Lost as well.
There is one. Before we get into the ending, there's one kind of big thing we're not mentioning, and there is a big fetch quest. I was not a huge fan of the big fetch quest.
Are you talking about the letters? Well, they're optional, right?
Yeah. You have the option if you want to run around and grab all these letters that are hidden in little caches by Mary Adler, and you tune into the radio to a frequency where she's hidden clues, and the clues are basically saying something and then spelling it out with NATO alphabet. And then also when you walk past where a letter's hidden, it like shines like it did in the games I played for little kids. Like a little shiny thing on the ground. The letters were good and they're well written. It was so late in the game that there was no real reason to go run around the whole island again.
Yeah, it was kind of weird to introduce collectible like halfway through.
They're always in your hut. Like if you go to the options menu, letters are permanently there. And I wish they hadn't told me that I'd be fetching letters later. It was a little disappointing. It felt like an afterthought.
I collected the ones that I happened across, but I think I probably only got like 25% of them. And I didn't feel like I really missed out on anything. Like the letters I did read, they did shed a little bit of light on this particular chapter of the history of the island, which is that, Mary Adler, the old lady that lived on the island. Well, it's clear that when she was younger, she had an interaction with these sailors on the dead sailors, the Triangle Ghosts. She encountered them when she was younger. But like, if you don't learn about that, like if you don't pick up Mary Adler's letters, you'll still get most of the story. You'll still understand most of what's going on. So it really is just an optional collectible. It bothered me a little bit, but not that much.
I only found like 2 of them, and I feel like I really have a pretty good understanding of what Maggie Adler had to do, like why she was there and what her role was. And I only found a couple of them. And you're right. It's like the end, or at least you're, I would say you
have to have the upgraded radio before you can find him at all.
And you're at like the crest right before the climax of the story. And they're like, oh, hey, how about you go explore the whole island again and find all these hidden objects? And you're like, no, I'm gonna go fight these ghosts.
Yeah, like I'm done. Also, at that point, it's like the dialogue's over. So if you are going to spend that time to go wander around the island, you're doing it in dead silence. So
Yeah, and you're
Alone.
like,
Yeah.
one of my friends might be dead. Like, I'm not gonna wander around looking for notes.
yeah, struggling with some of the most frustrating like terrain traversal controls of all time without anybody to talk to you while you hobble over the low walls. Like,
Yeah, I essentially just disregarded it. I was like, oh,
Yeah, same here.
Okay, whatever. Kept going.
and at that point, I was also really eager to get to the ending because I was really curious about what was going to happen. And I'd say that the ending was a pretty good payoff.
Yeah, I loved shooting all the way to the end. The ghosts have Clarissa. I'm assuming the ghosts had Clarissa, right?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, I think so.
The ghosts had Clarissa, and they essentially offer Alex a couple different deals. One is which they could just take Clarissa, and everyone else is fine, or they'll kill everyone, or Clarissa or Alex could save her friends, but essentially kill herself. Like, that's kind of like the ultimate climax. And you're not really given the option to decide one of those three. Though with Alex, you can be like, no, never. Why? I'm not going to turn my friends.
You can.
Yeah, there's some ways.
Are there real, true multiple endings to this?
Yes.
There definitely
Okay.
are.
You can walk
okay.
out of that gap and just leave Clarissa to die.
You can make a deal with the entity that they can take Clarissa, and you're okay with it as long as they let the rest of you go. And in that case, it like sacrifices Clarissa and erases her from everyone's memories.
Okay, well, that's a little bit.
There's you can I mean, we're talking a lot of spoilers here. There's a lot of possible endings, and there's a lot of variations on the endings. So, for example, like you can decide some of your choices decide whether you are able to exploit this opportunity to bring your dead brother Michael back from the dead.
You have no idea you're doing that.
Yeah,
by the way.
that's sort of.
They don't hint at it. You're talking to your brother Michael, and then something you did.
Yeah, it kind of either happens or doesn't, and it's because you flash back and have these conversations with Michael, and if you're really paying attention, you realize that, well, if Michael had, I think it was if he left for college, then he wouldn't have been there on the day that he drowned or something like that.
If he didn't run away with Clarissa.
Right. So if you're really paying attention, you might be able to kind of decide on that choice, but it sort of just happens.
Gank told us not to.
He did.
I didn't know what I was
doing.
Don't
influence Michael. And
I didn't
was
know.
Like,
Yeah. So my ending was that I said, no, I'm staying. I'm not going to sacrifice anyone. We're getting out of here. We're going to do it. And it climaxes in Alex basically talking them down. And it happens really quickly. And she's just like, remember your humanity. One of you was named Henry, which we learned from the somewhere in the game. And
I had Calvin because I read more letters than you did.
Oh,
Yeah.
maybe it was the two letters that I read, and they're like, remember, you're Henry. And they're like, Henry. Henry. And then they remember that they're human, and they're like, okay, you can go. And it's just like, man, really? Like, they've been trying to get humans for like 70 or 50 years or whatever, and all it takes is us being like, your name is Henry. And they're like, oh, you're right.
Oh, man, sorry.
Oh,
We're
I
such
forgot.
terrible people.
I forgot I
We're
was
people.
Henry.
We forgot that.
Yeah. I just like, they're like evil monsters that literally have they enact these teenagers killing themselves in front of you a couple of times.
Just to mess with you, yeah.
Just to mess with you. And I was like, they're not getting talked down by just saying that. I didn't think that was a very, I was a little unsatisfied with that. Now, it does have
that scene played out
twist.
okay for me. I think I don't know what else I would have expected there. Really, I thought it worked.
know.
I hear you, but I don't know if that. I don't think that part of it really bothered me that much.
And I'm nitpicking, but I was just like, it wrapped up that conversation, them going, like, everything led up to it, and then you saying something to the effect of, your name is Henry. It was like 25 seconds later, the story was resolved.
Yeah.
It was like, that was the magic words. If only Maggie had said your name is Henry. once in the 50 years that she'd been, fighting with them. Like,
Or did she?
or did she?
Because time loops.
Yeah. Okay.
And then did you get the ending of the real what a twist ending?
Yes, I'm pretty sure that happens in. So there's a lot of variations on the ending. It ends with a very sort of like, I would almost say sort of Breakfast Club type ending where it says,
Zooms around a photo.
It shows a photo of whoever happened to have survived, which can vary, and tells you where everybody's ended up. Clarissa got a dog and went to college or whatever. Once it finishes telling you all of this, Alex says, "Oh, I gotta go. Gotta go meet up with my new stepbrother. We're going to this dumb island party. I hope it's not awful."
Dun-na-na.
Dun-na-na. You realize she's caught in a time loop.
She's in a time loop, which just like the sailors. So like, did she actually, or did they actually get out? I get that. Like, it leaves a lot of questions at the end. Like,
I like the ambiguity of the ending. I'm a little tired of twist endings, but then again, it's sort of obligatory in almost everything that has any sort of horror aspect to it. Like, you got to get that last, like, Carrie's hand shoots up out of the dirt for no reason dig in. You have to have that at the end.
Anything with time loops on a micro level, like, oh, it turns out the whole thing
Of course it was a time loop. Yeah. So I thought the ending was totally serviceable and it worked for me. And I actually I liked the Breakfast Clubby catch up with all the characters and where are they now kind of thing at the end. And the time loop ending didn't really bother me. So I'd say like my main complaint about the ending is that that the variations that you have a lot of choices you can make throughout the game. There are a lot of variations, but all of them are relatively inconsequential. Like they're it's how who ends up dating who at the end, or it's not so much that they're inconsequential. Like you do have choices that end up deciding, for example, like is Michael alive or dead? It's really just that the consequences are only seen in that one scene at the end, and it's just a monologue where you're being kind of told how things shook out. I really would have liked a couple more scenes toward the end. I would have liked more denouement, more opportunity to see the characters talking to each other after this whole experience and kind of see the effects of my choices in dialogue rather than just as a monologue.
Yeah. I really enjoyed the whole story overall, and my opinions on the ending are obviously to my specific one, because mine basically like everyone survived, and Alex like sweet talked the murderous ghosts like pretty quickly out of everything. It was just like that's not super satisfying. But I also like she kept saying like we're gonna get out of here no matter what, so I thought it would climax in like a like she like defeats the or like something a little bit.
And then you have to pull off a sweet combo move in order to
like I don't know, or like
all of a sudden you're just out.
Yeah, it's true.
And like I wake up on a ship and my brother's on it, so I'm like, cool. Everyone's on this boat. There is no climax. Like you're just on a boat and you're leaving the island and you're like, wait, what?
So did I win?
The game ended for me.
Yeah, the game has a lot of branching dialogue, but not really a lot of branching plot. Like the actual consequences of your dialogue choices mostly have to do with who says what and not who does what, which is fine. But it did feel like when it got down to the end and they showed me the little pie charts for like you did this and your friends did this and the wider internet did this. It didn't feel like my choices were quite as huge or consequential as they feel in something like a Telltale game or a like Life is Strange, things like that. The effects of the choices mostly just had to do with how people felt about each other and what sort of things they were saying to each other rather than like what actually happened. That said, the dialogue was really good, and it did really respond to what you were doing in the choices. Like the dialogue was very responsive.
I would say I enjoyed the dialogue more than most of the Telltale games.
Yeah,
I think the Telltale games have more weight probably, but they're not as like this was a thriller more than it was a story. Like it's like somehow more a thriller than a zombie game. You know?
Yeah.
So anyway, I would highly recommend anyone play this game if they like thrilling story games. So,
and it's available on Steam for $20, and it's available for Mac and Windows. That was a big help for me because I didn't have to boot over to Windows for it. Ran great on Mac, just fine. And it's also out on the Xbox One. It's console exclusive to the Xbox One. I think they had a deal with Microsoft there, so not out on the PlayStation. If you're waiting for a console release, you're probably likely to be waiting a while. So I would pick this up and play it on your computer. Works great with a controller, but you can also play it with a mouse and keyboard. And took me about 4 hours to complete. So next week on The Short Game, a game that we have literally been talking about since the very first episode of this show. On episode 1 of The Short Game, we talked about how we had just heard an announcement about a game that sounded really neat called Firewatch. Those many years ago. And by years, I mean like a year and a half-ish,
about
maybe?
a year and a half or so.
Yeah. So Firewatch is finally coming out when we record this tomorrow. When you hear this, probably a couple of days ago. Why haven't you already downloaded it yet? I mean, I can't say that for sure. I haven't played the game yet, but it has been getting pretty great reviews. It's coming out tomorrow, and we can't wait to talk about it. So this will probably be one of our shortest turnarounds between game release and review for a game where we didn't get explicitly like pre-release codes. So can't wait to talk about that next week. And thank you so much for joining us this week on The Short Game. I've been your host, Reagan Kelly. You can find me on Twitter at ReaganK. That's RayGanK. And you can find our show on Twitter as well. That's @_shortgame or www.theshortgame.net, where you'll find a contact form and email. And we love hearing from you. So if you have a game that you're interested in that you think we ought to be covering, you should let us know. Or if you have feedback about an old episode, send us that too. We get warm, fuzzy feelings out of that. Also, if you haven't, you should leave us a review on iTunes, which is always a huge help. It helps keep the show visible and get it in front of new audiences, and that's very important to us, of course. Also, just share it with your friends. Do that. You should tell people about it. And of course, I was joined this week by my two awesome co-hosts. Thank you again, Laura Nash. Where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Laura J. Nash.
And Nate Heininger. Where can people find you?
On Twitter at NateSTL.
And thank you again, listener, for joining us on this week's episode of The Short Game.